Superhero costumes follow a certain pattern, many of which involve bodysuits, that were in many ways inspired by traditional athletes like strongmen and wrestlers. For example, there's speculation that Superman was inspired by a strongman called Sigmund Breitbart, whose tagline was the Superman of the Ages, and toured the United States in the early 1900s. He would also wear capes and was said to be able to stop a train, and likewise when Fleischer was making their Superman cartoons, they used a professional wrestler as a rotoscope model, Carol Krauser, and when designing Superman, his creator said that his outfit was athletic and tight. Traditionally, career athletes like wrestlers and bodybuilders have put a lot of emphasis on their physique, showing off their muscles and not wearing much in the way of clothing. In fact, in ancient Greece, athletes would compete in the Olympics completely naked, but there are other reasons for athletes to wear tight and lightweight clothing than just showing off their physical prowess and bodies. It also allows for a freer range of movement, which is very important when competing, and this is carried over into the modern era, as well as superhero comics. Brightly colored bodysuits and leotards are a staple of the superhero genre. Even characters whose powers aren't specifically tied to physical prowess still follow these conventions, and this is true for Marvel and DC. Another component found in superhero designs are insignias, symbols that represent either a character or their teams. For example, the X-Men will often wear X's on their costumes, giving them a sense of cohesion, even with their individually tailored costumes. And this has been the norm for almost a century, pretty much across the entire run of superhero comics. The look has become iconic and synonymous with both heroes and villains. But one team that I think falls short design-wise is the Hellfire Club, a supervillain team from the X-Men. Their most notable member is Emma Frost, aka the White Queen. She was recently introduced to Marvel Rivals, and has some lines referencing the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club has kind of a weird history. Chris Claremont and John Byrne created them, and they were heavily inspired by a 1960s spy show called The Avengers. And the whole thing kind of feels like plagiarism, if I'm being honest. I mean, there's homages, and then there's just kind of outright copying. So the Hellfire Club is actually a real-life secret society. According to Google, they're known for debauchery and mocking religion. So I guess they're satanic sex pests? So the Avengers, the spy show, not the superhero team, that's admittedly very confusing, used them as villains for one of their episodes, an episode that Claremont and Byrne watched, which featured the female lead, Emma, yes, that's her name, infiltrate the Hellfire Club by moonlighting as the Queen of Sin, since, you know, they do orgies. So they carried all this over into the comics, which I do think is a bit strange considering the fact that these books were still being marketed to children, like the Toys R Us sweepstake that ran for about a year during this time. But regardless, they're here now, and personally I think the designs for these characters really falls flat on practically every level. Because they're based on an old-timey secret society, they're given these old-timey costumes to wear, with the exception of the female members. In both the Avengers spy show and apparently real life, female members just wear the same time-appropriate costumes, and only wear the fetish gear when they're actually engaging in that kind of activity. But for the comics, they made it that they wear that Queen of Sin outfit just all the time. The in-universe explanation is that Sebastian Shaw, the leader of the Hellfire Club, is a pervert who wants to degrade women, but really it's just the writer's barely disguised fetish. Not even barely disguised, honestly. They literally have whips, just to drive that point home. But putting that aside, the men are all in these garish colors that don't seem to have any rhyme or reason. The members of the Hellfire Club's inner circle use titles based off of chess pieces. That's why Emma Frost is known as the White Queen. Meanwhile, Sebastian Shaw is the Black King. However, he's wearing this really ugly green. I have no idea why they would make that choice. At least Emma and Selene are wearing white and black respectively, which actually aligns with their titles. But on top of that, there's nothing about Sebastian's design that visually indicates that he's the leader of the Hellfire Club. Them all wearing the same outfits not only makes things repetitive among the group, but also does nothing to indicate visually what rank these characters are. In fact, as you can see in this picture, Tessa does not have a title, and that's because Tessa isn't actually a member of the inner circle of the Hellfire Club, but she's still wearing the outfit, and gets included in the roster. So I can't help but wonder what's even the point. They had so many opportunities with these character designs, but instead they just made them so bland. They could have incorporated the chess theme in some way instead of just being a title, and it could have helped make them a lot more visually distinct, and a lot more visually interesting. One villainous team that I think executes executes their concept really well is the Royal Flush Gang. Originally appearing in the 1960s in DC Comics, there have been multiple iterations of this villainous team. As the name implies, they're based off of playing cards, and also have an aristocratic flair to them. However, they actually adhere to comic book conventions and look like a supervillain team, while also having a unique visual identity, instead of just basically looking like someone made a Victorian erotica. They also have a much more appealing color palette, utilizing black, white, red, and gold accents, exactly like you would see on a playing card, instead of having a bunch of seemingly random and extremely garish colors. There are 5 core members of the team, and sometimes they have lackeys too, but usually it's those 5, consisting of the King, Queen, Jack, Ace, and 10 cards, those specific cards making up the Royal Flush Hand in poker. Unlike the Hellfire Club, their designs are visually unique, but since there's an obvious theme, they have cohesion among them, while also denoting rank within the group. They actually do something with their titles beyond just existing. But even 2 characters that share the same title can still be visually interesting and unique from each other, both in their costume design and their character design. For example, the Ace is typically used as the muscle of the team, and sometimes he's literally just an android. However, in the Justice League animated series, which is arguably one of their most notable appearances, specifically because of their Ace, she's portrayed as a young girl, with incredible psychic powers, a notable but memorable departure from their usual lineup. I'd argue that Ace's tragic story is one of Batman's best moments, really speaking to who he is as a character, and even though the other members of this Royal Flush Gang weren't as impactful as Ace, I still think they were largely more successful than the Hellfire Club. Take this Queen for example. Admittedly, I think she's one of the weaker designs that we've seen across the Royal Flush Gangs, since there's nothing visually to signify that she's the Queen card specifically. They probably could have given her a headpiece or a different kind of accessory to make it more obvious, since she could easily be mistaken for the 10 card or maybe even Ace in this case. But the reason why I bring up Queen to begin with is because her design was clearly considering sex appeal, what with the plunging neckline and all. However, she still adheres to comic conventions while also being on theme for the team she's on, instead of just literally being fetish gear. That looks like it belongs in a very different comic than superheroes. Overall, I just think the Hellfire Club is really underwhelming in their designs. There was so much they could have done with them. Instead, they're just completely uninspired. Literally, they were basically lifted from an already existing show. But that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you think the Hellfire Club are fine and I'm just being too much of a purist? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Lucas Geist, J Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Mac B909, Dakari the Professor, Omni Fair, General Bolivar, Cavalcoj, Strider Exile, Phil C, Killer Bomb, Slawa Saporiguez, Entwined Boot 301, Griffin of Might, Frankie Camarillo, Datadyne Executive, Crimson Phantom, Jin the Goblin, Papa Hud 69, The Gengar King, and Daunter. Thank you for the support, and if you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and that part's free. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.